everyone, welcome back to Rolling Solo. My name is Adam Smith, and in this video we are going to start the gameplay, the solo gameplay for Role Player Adventures. Now, if you haven't checked out my unboxing as well as the setup video to help us get ready for the Battle at Blacklake storybook, you're going to want to do that. I'll put a link to it in the top right hand corner right now so you can check those videos out first to see how all this got to the table. And now we're going to jump into the gameplay, starting with the narrative for this story. As a Kingsguard soldier in the regiment of Commander Zalek, a dark elf, you have fought a long war. The Dragul, a coalition of northern tribes, invaded Nalos, your homeland. After many battles, you have driven off their hordes, but rumors spread through the camp of a new Dragul plot. One night, you are summoned to Commander Zalek's tent, where you find him arguing over a map with General Grick, an orc. A gold coin marks the southern city of Sebek. A vial of elixir marks a swamp to the west. General Grick raises an eyebrow when you enter. "So you're Zalek's best?" he asks, looking you over skeptically. "We have a special mission for you, but first a question of strategy. Zalek wants to take your regiment south to investigate a threat to the capital," says Grick, pointing to the coin. Then, pointing to the vial, "I think we should push west and capture a powerful Dragul agent in the swamps. What say you?" So we have a decision to make. These little icons with the question marks inside of them beside the two choices shown here are choice indicators, letting us know we have a choice to make here. And of course, once we make that decision, it's going to push us forward in this journey, whether we begin 1 or begin 2. So the two choices we have here is to side with General Grick and learn more about the Dragul plots, or side with Commander Zalek and investigate threats to the capital. I'm going to choose to side with General Grick, and we are going to learn more about the Dragul plots. Begin 1. You point to the vial of elixir, and General Grick laughs, patting you on the back. "Yes, exactly," he says. Zalek nods. "I'll leave you to it," he says. He collects his coin and exits the tent. Now, it states here inside of the book that you're going to record some keywords as you go along through your adventure, and as you can see just below that area, it tells us to go ahead and record the keyword Grick. So in our campaign tracker or log, you can see the keyword section now has that keyword added in. "You can keep the vial," the general says to you, rolling up the map. "You'll need it where you're going. Leave now and travel due east until you reach a small enemy encampment. A special operative of King Terran will meet you there. You collect the elixir from the table and drink it down." With a nod, the general sends you forth. At this point, it tells us to gain an XP, which I'll do in a moment. It says you make haste under a crescent moon, crossing burnt and abandoned farmland into open prairie. At the top of a bluff, you look out over a dark lake to a wooden outpost, and at this point we're going to place our party marker at location A and then read entry A as well. As you can see on the campaign log, 1 XP has been placed into the XP area. And on our world map, we've now used the party marker, which is a miniature showing 2 different individuals on a single miniature stand, now placed at a Borland Prairie. It told us to read entry A, and entry A, of course, is the Borland Prairie where our party currently resides. It also mentions, and you'll see these tips throughout this storybook, again reminding you of things you need to be aware of in terms of gameplay and how to play the game and how to understand the different iconography that you're running into. So here we have action indicators, which are always read and resolved in order from top to bottom. Sometimes an action indicator will direct you to another entry. When this happens, you immediately turn to that entry without reading or resolving any more action indicators. So at this point we have 2 options here. It says if there is no XP at this location, we're going to move to 1A. Otherwise, we're going to collect the XP from this location and continue reading. Now, because we have just placed our miniature at a Borland Prairie, there is an XP there from setup. So we are going to go ahead, gather that XP, giving us a total of 2, and continue reading. As you look out over the lake, a voice calls from a thicket behind you. "Care to join me?" You turn to discover a friendly halfling roasting apples and hares by his fire. You look like you could use a meal. You disregard the halfling and he chuckles, then stands to salute you. "Tarek Nolan, special operative of King Terran, confidant of the immortal king and bearer of bad news and terrible secrets. Now come, eat and rest, for we have hard work ahead of us." As you eat, Tarek speaks in a hushed voice. "The lake below is dark. for the Dragul filled it with the blood and ashes of their dead. Our mission is to secure the outposts. The northern shore is guarded by an encampment of goblins, weak but many. Nalos stand watch to the south. We need to eliminate both camps, so take your pick. You go one way and I'll go the other. Burn down their camp to signal your progress. I'll do the same. Tarek pulls something from his pack and tosses it to you. We'll need this at the gate. We have a tip here around discovery cards. It says, when instructed to reveal a specific discovery card, do not shuffle or examine other cards in the deck. Only find and reveal the card referenced by the text. The discovery deck is organized in numerical order, and the cards are numbered on their backs. And of course, this book is going to tell you specifically which number to grab. In this case, it says, reveal discovery card 65. So again, just to show you, you're only going to be looking for that card from the back side. And then, of course, once you find it, the text here states in the book to reveal it. And it appears that we found a blue stone fireball. Now the item number is up in the top left-hand corner, and then right beside it in a smaller icon, which shows a stamina cube, in this case with a 1 beside it, it's letting you know its stamina cost. Moving right along, we have a tip here for using items. So items can be used at a location, and when you use an item, every player has to place a stamina in their fatigue box from the supply equal to the cost listed on the card. In this case, when I'm playing solo or true solo with just one character, I'm just moving 1 stamina based on the cost that I showed you there in the top left-hand corner of the card into the fatigue box if I wish to use this. If I was controlling multiple characters, I'd be placing 1 in for each of the characters involved. Now, the lower portion of the using items box is where things get really interesting. If you have items in your possession, of course, I only have the Bluestone Fireball right now, and I am currently at a Borland Prairie. If I wanted to, as you can see just down below from the box, I have choice indicators coming up, allowing me to potentially use an item that I have, or to just move to another location. So I could choose to use this Bluestone Fireball where I currently am. This is a way in which you can use all the items you've gained during gameplay in order to unlock and open up different aspects of the story, and to allow those items that you actually have on you to make major impacts in your journey. So this is really cool, and the easy way to basically use these items is you'll take the location you're currently at, which is a Borland Prairie here on the map listed as A, so it's A at the very front, and then you take the item number that you have for that particular item and you're going to tag it onto it. So it'll be A65, you go find that entry in the book, and then you're able to determine whether this item has any value in the location you're currently in. A65 states, if you have either of the keywords alarm or clear, you move to A2 right away, but we don't have either of those keywords, so we can skip past this. It says, to Tarek's alarm, you casually begin to uncork the blue potion. Not here, he cries, grabbing your hands to stop you. Any exposure to air and the fireball will explode, which would be very loud and could easily kill us. Let's try to stay quiet and alive. Save the fireball for the gate. Our next decision here says we could use another item, and at this point I don't have any reason to do so. The Bluestone Fireball is the only thing I have at this point, or we can move to another location, so that's the choice I'm going to make. Also going to mention another tip here around resolving encounters. So it says, in a multiplayer game, the player to the right of the storyteller reads from the Tome of Encounters. Now, this piece we can completely skip over when you're playing solo, because the bonus is when you're playing solo, you are in command of your entire story from start to finish. One of the best reasons to play a game like this solo, as you get to fully decide, whereas with multiple players around the table, you kind of come to an agreement, and you also are handling the storybooks and the encounter books by passing them around as the game unfolds, which does make for quite a fun way to play as well. However, when playing solo, you don't have to worry about tossing books around the table or doing any of that kind of stuff, because again, you get to control the story, and there's nobody that can tell you differently in whichever choice you really want to do. As you can see up in the top right hand corner there, I have the Bluestone Fireball in the items section, which essentially is to the left of the campaign log. That's where you keep those cards, but of course you can keep them really anywhere you want. When you're playing solo, you're going to be the only one that's actually interacting with those, so keep them close to you if you'd like. And it's worth mentioning as well, when I was talking about using an item at a particular location and how you use the letter from the location with the actual item number of the card itself that you want to use there, you can also combine items together as well. And how that's done is, if I was at the location I'm currently at, it would be A is the first thing I'd be looking for, then whichever is the lowest item number of the two cards I'm combining. So let's say I had a 65, which I do have in hand, and I also had a 63, then it would be A63.65, and that's what I would look for inside the storybook for adventure number 1 to determine if there was something that would come out of combining two items. So getting back on track with the adventure, I'm going to choose to move along. I want to head to either the Goblin camp or the Gnoll camp, thanks to Tarek letting me know he'll cover whichever one I don't. I just need to choose which way I want to go here. You'll notice the dotted line from location number A, the Borland Prairie. There is also an encounter token sitting in between either of the paths I choose to make it to either of the camps. So regardless, we're going to be running into an encounter, and I'll be able to show you how that works. I'm going to choose to actually head towards the Gnoll camp, but as I just mentioned, we need to stop halfway there and resolve the encounter. Our party has made it halfway to the Gnoll camp, and as you can see, I've flipped over the encounter token now that we've made it there, and it shows 1. So now we're going to go into the Tome of Encounters, a separate coil-bound book, and based on the fact we're in adventure number 1, that is going to be ADV1 dash, and then whatever came up on the encounter token, which is a 1 in this case, so it'll be 1-1. It states inside the encounter book that now that we've found the entry that matches the encounter token, we can remove the token from the adventure map and return it to the box. It states, you freeze in place when you hear a sound ahead of you on the trail. Quietly creeping into cover, you look ahead and spy a 6-limbed insectoid sentry pacing back and forth across the trail. 2 sets of arms, each hold a short bow with an arrow notched and ready. It seems that you'll have to deal with this sentry if you wish to take the camp by surprise. The choice indicators below offer a choice between 2 skill checks. This is the first time we've run into a skill check, so we'll walk through this process in full. It states here each shows which attributes will be used to resolve the skill check. This gives you a nice heads up in advance, and once you've made your choice, turn to the corresponding entry here in the Tome of Encounters. So we have to choose first, are we doing sneaking around the sentry, or are we going to wrestle him to the ground and knock him out? Looking at my construct's attributes, you can see here the strength, it references dex and wisdom, are not exactly my strong suits. I'm going to choose to be stealthy and sneak around the sentry. You move forward quickly and silently, staying downwind from the insectoid sentry while his attention is elsewhere. Having left the trail, however, you must pass through dry brush without making a sound. At this point, we're going to be making a skill check. Here is a tip around skill checks. It states the box below initiates a skill check. To complete a skill check, all players will work together to cover every dice slot on a skill check row with a die that matches the indicated color and number. You'll first build your dice pool, then play cards to manipulate your rolled dice. And we're going to talk about this as we actually resolve this skill check. And the skill check states right here, Stealth 1. These skill checks are going to test the skill of your party members, in my case, just a single one, as you traverse through the adventure. Now, as you remember me saying just a moment ago, this was a skill check Stealth 1. So you're going to find the skill coil-bound book, and you're going to rip through it until you find the same keyword, in this case, stealth. And they're going to look over here across the rows. There's 4 rows, and each of them have a Roman numeral. And in this case, we're looking for Stealth 1, so we're only focused on the top row. Now, you might be thinking, well, you've pretty much seen everything there is here for a stealth check between the different difficulty levels down the road even. Well, there's even more to it than that. If your skill check box has square brackets around a specific keyword, you're going to come into this modifier deck and find the keyword that it mentions. Now, in this particular check you just saw moments ago, there's no square brackets, there's nothing to add in here, but it will specifically mention certain keywords coming from the modifier deck that are going to change how you're able to be successful in doing your skill check. So it's going to throw things at you you're not going to be prepared for. However, luckily we're at the very beginning of the game, so things are pretty cut and dry right now. We're just looking at this top row right here. The first thing we're going to take a look at is the dice limit for that particular check, which is listed right underneath of the Roman numeral for the skill. So in this case, it says dice limit of 4. So that is the maximum amount of dice we can use to try to be successful at this skill check. Now, players are going to spend stamina by moving it from their attribute rows, which are right here, to their fatigue boxes to add a die of a specific color. And of course, the colors are right there in the attribute rows. So for me specifically during this check, I really want to actually pass this and have things go smoothly. So I'm going to go ahead and spend the 1 dex that I have and the 1 wisdom that I have, moving them into the fatigue area in order to grab a black die and a white die out of the bag. And you can keep doing this so long as you don't go over the dice limit. Now, in this particular case, adding any extra dice for any of my other attributes would actually add no value because, as you can see for this particular skill check, this is a black and white situation in terms of the types of dice that I need to use in order to make this skill check. If a colored die is a part of it, in other words, something like red, green, purple, or something along those lines, those colors will be shown on the outline of the dice in the skill check row. And then you can see in this case, some of those things will happen a little bit later on with some of these checks near the tail end. You can see some color showing up down here where even the one at the very bottom right here could be any die of any color. So you're going to have to keep your eyes on that as well. And of course, we already got a heads up as to which different attribute skills were going to be the focus for what we chose based on the original skill check box. You'll remember it specifically mentioned Dex and Wisdom for sneaking around. So once you've gone ahead and fatigued a bunch of your stamina in order to get some dice in there that you really want, we now have to blind draw the rest of the dice up to the dice limit from the bag. So literally just going to give this thing a shuffle, reach inside, and we're going to grab out a couple dice. Now we can hope they're going to match what we need, but they may not, and that's kind of part of the fun. So let's go ahead and grab a couple dice here. We got a red and a blue. Now we're going to collect all the dice that we built into our pool, and we're going to roll them. Well, you're certainly not going to see me complaining about this roll. I landed a black 2, which is exactly what I needed for that very first position. You'll see the very last position is a 6, and it needs to be either white or black, and I got a white one. So 2 of the 3 are what I need already. Then I just have the blue and the red die, which I really don't need those colors. I need a white die, and I need it to be a 1. So the question is, now we go to our hand of cards that we had set up from the very beginning of the game, and I'm going to hope that I have cards in there that I can use to manipulate the dice. Now, just before I show you all the cards that I have in my hand, and you would have seen those during the setup video, but up there in the bonus play section where there's a token with a hand and a card, and there's also a limit there, that limit lets you know that no matter how many people are playing the game and how many characters are in play, each character is only going to be allowed to play 1 card out of their hand based on the current limit there on the campaign log. And of course, that limit can increase and change as the game goes along, but as of right now, I can only play 1 card from my hand to manipulate dice. So that works out really well for me right now. But the other thing I can do if the 1 card isn't enough is I can use a bonus play token, which is the circle token in that bonus play area. I put that into my fatigue area if I want to play an additional card beyond the 1 of the normal limit. So taking a look at all the cards that I have in my hand, you can see there's icons on all of them, and trying to explain every single icon for all of these cards right at the gates might be a bit of an overload, but I can tell you right now the icons are labeled out inside of the rulebook at the very back very easily. You're not going to have any issues around that whatsoever understanding these, and once you get them down, you're going to be running, no problem at all. Now this may look like a lot to take in, but most of it's relatively simple. So for instance, I know that I'm trying to go after another white die. So I might want to do something like enchant. Now there's a gamble there. If I use that card, I'm grabbing a random die from the bag, so I don't know what color it's going to be, and I'm setting it to 4, which of course 4 is not going to be the value result that I need inside the die. I have a white one right now. I need a 1 to make sure I can get things going here. So that card may not be the best one to use, and of course I am trying to think outside the box in terms of not just playing 1 card, but maybe 2 back to back to make it work. But it's very difficult when you don't have the right color, and you also need it to nail the right value. So it becomes quite a little bit of a puzzle trying to figure out which cards to use in which order to get there. So as an example here, the spell book has a white die on it. You might think, hey, that could be a good one, but it actually doesn't work in this situation. I was hoping that I'd be able to use a white die to be able to uptick or downtick the white die by 1, so maybe make that 6 down to a 1, but you can't make that kind of a jump with that upticking or downticking option on these cards. It has to be a 6 going to a 5 or a 1 going to a 2. You can't wrap all the way around like I would love to be able to do. Now, why would I bother even thinking about that? Because if I could change this white die to the one that works for the center one, it would open up potentially more options for this one, as it could be a black or a white 6 to work in there. And then maybe by using my bonus play token, I could play another card to find that die somehow. Another card ability that could make that white 6 a white 1 to make this whole check potentially easier is Manipulate, which allows me to flip it over to its opposite side, which would allow the white 6 to become a white 1, and that's because the actual card states I could do it on either a purple or a white die. The downside of this is that would use my 1 card from my hand that I'm allowed up to the limit of the bonus play, but I still do have a bonus play token to spend regardless of what I've got here. Looking through all the options, there is nothing that I can do in order to make this skill check a success at this point. So I'm going to end up failing this one, and it's worth noting when you're playing true solo, the first adventure is going to be tough. It might seem almost overwhelmingly so, but as the adventure continues and you grow your hand of cards in terms of manipulation and options and what you've gained overall, you're going to find things start to even out quite quickly. So in that first adventure, be prepared for a tough time. Now, when reading through these cards, the thing you want to really keep in mind is anytime you see a dividing line, a perfectly vertical line in between things, you have a choice of one or the other. So in this case, the spell book would allow me to take a white die and either uptick it by 1 or decrease it by 1. But that's an or statement. You will have ones like this, the wand, for instance, which allows you to uptick something by 1 or decrease it by 1. And you can choose between a blue or a green die in that case. The Mystic Robes over here has a reroll icon, so you can reroll a die, but it has to be either a blue or a green die. And then down below you have things like weak, so an any color die, literally any color, can then be converted into the color that you need, hopefully a purple or a red in this case. And you have to choose between those two options. Manipulate, we've already talked about. Resolute basically tells you that if you have a 3 or a 4 that you've rolled, you can treat it as any other color. And you also don't want to forget about your class ability, which might come in handy in these situations. In this case, it doesn't. So you'll slot all of your dice into the row and now move to the skill check resolution. So no matter the outcome of the skill check, pass or fail, you're still going to gain rewards for covered dice slots. So that is the benefit of still failing checks, is you are still progressing in a way. So in this case, you'll see I have the black die filled in there in the first spot, which has a blue cube underneath of it. We know those blue cubes are XP. So I get 1 XP, which gets added to the campaign log. All the dice get returned to the dice bag. All modifier cards, if there were any in the skill check, go back to the modifier deck. We didn't have any, so nothing to worry about there. Then each player is going to return all the cards from the discard pile to their hand space. So currently that's not going to matter for us because, well, we didn't use any cards. So nothing's sitting in our discard space down below under our player board. And then if the rest token on the party journal is face down right now, you're going to flip it face up. Currently it's already face up, so nothing to do there. And now, of course, we need to resolve the pass or fail effect of the skill check. And just to close the loop on your understanding in terms of cards used to manipulate dice, when you use a card to manipulate dice, if in the top left-hand corner there's no icon whatsoever, it's going into your discard pile when you use it. If it has this up arrow showing in the top left-hand corner, it goes into your spent pile here. And the spent pile, as you just probably realized, does not get replenished back into your hand at the end of a skill check. It's only the stuff in your discard pile that goes back into your hand. So you are going to want to keep an eye on the cards that end up in that spent pile. Not because it's a bad thing, but it's just you're not going to get them back to be able to be used as often as the ones that end up in the discard. So strategic thinking there is going to be key on when to use those. Now heading back into the log for this skill check, it states if we fail the sneak, he raises an alarm as you flee. We're now going to go to 1-8 in the encounter book. It says you sneak carefully, but not carefully enough. The brush rustles around you, drawing the attention of the insectoid sentry, who sounds his horn to raise an alarm in the camp ahead. You hope that the rogue is having better luck on his side of the lake. At this point, we're going to record the keyword alarm, and it says Tarek is handling his side of the lake. Remove the other encounter token from the adventure map and return it to the box, and then continue to 114. So to sum things up here, the encounter token has been removed. We gained an XP through the skill check, even though we failed it, which brings us to a total of 3. And we have the keyword alarm now added up to the keywords Grick on the campaign log. It states, before heading forward to the camp, you take a moment to catch your breath. The crescent moon reflects eerily off the glassy black surface of the water. Rest. The first choice indicator below gives you the opportunity to rest. You should rest now so that you can learn how it works. See the resting section on page 11 of the rulebook, but I'm going to walk you through this in real time, so let's go ahead and do just that. When you do a rest, you're going to spend 1 or more XP. You're going to return the spent XP from the party journal to the supply. Each player draws dice from the dice bag equal to the amount of XP spent. So if I was to spend all 3 XP here, I get 3 dice from the bag, or if I spent 1, I just get 1. I've gone ahead and spent 1 XP. We're going to go ahead and roll 1 die for that, and I got exactly what I needed. So that was quite lucky. Could have been a 1 and could have been worse. And just like that, we're all squared away. Now, each player whose class card was face down is going to flip it up. We currently didn't use our class ability, so that doesn't need to change. Each player is going to return all the bonus play tokens from their fatigue box to the bonus play space. So you can see that if we had gone into the last skill check and used the bonus play token and a whole bunch of stamina, there is a way to get this stuff back by resting. So it is very important. But again, nothing here for me there. Each player then returns all cards from their spent space to their hand space. So this is the only way to bring cards that end up being discarded for those skill checks, for example, back into your actual hand to be used in the future. And then you're going to, of course, going to flip the rest token on the party journal face down. So that rest token that is currently face up will be flipped over. And it's worth mentioning that unlike most choice indicators, the rest choice indicator is never going to direct the party to another storybook entry. After you rest, the party must read the list of choice in the indicators in the current storybook entry again and choose another one from the list. And as you'll remember, which I won't show you in this shot, but the last choice underneath of rest was to move to another location. So we're going to do exactly that. And we know our focus is to get to the Knoll camp, so let's move our party onwards. The second we make it to this location, we can also take the XP cube that's there and place it on the campaign log. Alright, so inside of the Knoll camp here, it talks about passing storybooks and keyword checks. The passing storybooks one, if you're playing by yourself solo, you completely can skip this, as you're going to be controlling all the books in the game and constantly referencing between them. The keyword check section says some of the action indicators below check for keywords. If you have the indicated keyword, turn to the entry named there. Remember to resolve the action indicators from top to bottom, turning to another entry immediately when instructed to do so. Now that you've arrived at the Knoll camp, pass the storybook to the next player. In this case, again, we can skip this, and we're going to go through a list of options here. Now, it's worth mentioning I jumped the gun a little bit here, because starting from top to bottom, you'll notice it says if there was no XP at this location, go to C1, and then the second one says otherwise collect the XP from this location. We know there was XP here the second I arrived, so we would skip past the first one, then we would collect the XP from the location and continue down the list. So be sure not to grab the XP like I just did too early, or it could throw the path of your story completely off. So make sure to wait until the storybook actually lets you know to grab that XP. And the next one down the list says if you have the keyword goblin, you're going to be heading to C5, which I don't, so we keep going down. If you have the keyword alarm, which we do, we just got it actually, we're going to C2, so that's exactly where we're going right now. Looks like we may have some combat coming our way. It says a single campfire lights the empty tents and pack bags of the Knoll encampment. Behind you in the darkness, a twig cracks. You turn to face the blades of 3 dog-faced creatures emerging from the darkness. They snarl and bark at you in their native tongue, spreading out to force your backs to the fire. The Knolls look hungry. They will not hesitate to make a meal of you tonight. There's a tip here around combat. It says to cover all dice slots on the enemy card with dice matching the indicated number and color, and of course more information can be found in the rulebook, but I'll be walking you through this all on camera. And just down below is the actual combat check itself. You'll notice right beside it, it has gang of in square brackets, so that is going to have us go grabbing a modifier card, which is going to throw some fun, and I believe it's depicted perfectly right here already as to what we'll be grabbing, and it's Knoll 21, and we're going to go ahead and grab those right now, set them up as we head into combat. So you are going to encounter enemies during your adventure, which are going to lead into combat situations like this. We have a modifier card, Gang of. It states during the first round of this combat, the combat dice limit is reduced by 1. We'll talk about that limit in a second. We have the actual enemy card to the right as well. There's a handful of icons on this card. Let's go over them quickly. So first off, the name of the enemy is depicted. Right underneath the name is basically a round track for the combat. 3 positions, and in this case here, we've got 2 different icons showing in round 2 and 3. We'll talk about those when we get to them, but we will be placing a round marker in the very first position in a moment. Then on the far right is what we need to do to succeed. So we need a green with a 1 on it. We need a white die with a 2 on it, and we need either a blue 2 or a red 2 to satisfy the last one. And underneath of each of those dice is not only the rewards depicted, but also if there's any counterattacks going on. Now, back in my setup video, we set the combat dice limit as specified. In this case, it's 3. We're going to be dropping that down by 1, so only 2. So I absolutely see this going at least 2 rounds of combat just based on the fact I'm going to be a little bit strapped for dice out of the gates. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use 1 of my stamina from my intelligence line in order to get a blue die into the fray to hopefully satisfy the one that could either be blue or red down there at the very bottom for a value of 2. We're going to go for that first and just see if I luck out with the harder ones off the first round. We'll see if that pans out. I don't know if that's going to work. We'll see. And remember, again, at this point, we're not getting values out of the dice. We're simply just building our dice pool by spending this stamina. So I've gone ahead and grabbed a blue die because I spent the stamina to get that particular die. Now I'm going to come into the bag and draw one at random to satisfy the rest of the combat dice limit. And I got myself a red, which is not exactly what I wanted to see here, as that's going to satisfy the same box, but maybe we'll up the odds that I can land that particular one. So let's go ahead, roll these dice, and see how we do. 2 6s. Now, something that I put on screen during the skill check that I didn't talk about thoroughly is this option of a 3-to-1 ratio to actually use an attribute where you have 0 stamina in it. So for instance, if I'm playing true solo and I literally have absolutely no stamina whatsoever in dex, but I really need a black die to be part of the equation, I can go ahead and spend stamina, a total of 3 from anywhere else, to be able to make up the stamina as if I had 1 sitting in the dex area to get that 1 die I need. So it is very costly to do this. You can do them during skill checks like this or combat, so you'll be able to manipulate your stuff that way and kind of get yourself out of a jam in some situations, but it is going to cost you a lot of stamina to do so. For now, I'm going to stick with what I have here. We're going to go ahead and roll this dice pool of 2 because, well, it should be 3, but thanks to the Gang of card, it's knocking it down a little bit. Let's see what we get here for a roll. We have a 6 and a 3. So now, very similar to the skill check, I can go ahead and spend up to the limit on bonus play how many cards from hand I want to use to manipulate the dice. Plus, if I want to use a bonus play token, I can use an additional card and have to put that in the fatigue area if I do it. What I'm going to do is just play up to the 1 limit that I have. So I'm going to play the wand here, which allows me to uptick a blue or a green die up by 1 or down by 1. So I'm going to choose to have it reduced by 1, bringing it from a 3 down to a 2 in order to satisfy this position right here. And the wand is a spent card, so as soon as I use it, it goes in the spent location. Now we're going to move to the end of a round, so if all the dice slots on the enemy card are covered, you skip to the end of combat and resolve that because we'd be done at that point. But we are not, so at this point, each player, being just me in this case, is going to suffer counterattacks for uncovered dice slots. So you'll see slots that I didn't cover up properly in the very top there, and the counterattacks are the red icon underneath each of them, which are both depicted at 3. So the knoll is going to give me 6 fatigue stamina that's going to go into the box. Now, I dodged things a little bit because it would have actually been another 2 fatigue stamina thrown in there if I hadn't covered up that 1 die slot. And if that pain and suffering wasn't enough, we now move the round marker to the next round of combat, which is going to throw another fatigue stamina in the box. So you're probably wondering, what is the fallout of all of this fatigue stamina showing up on the player board? Well, exhaustion is the end result of this if you get to a certain amount. So when the amount of stamina in the player's fatigue box is equal to their current health, they're immediately exhausted, and any more stamina that will be added to their fatigue box is going to be ignored until they are revived. Now, we're not at that point just yet because we know we have 14 health, but having 8 in the box is pretty concerning. Now, one thing that adds to the stress levels of dealing with an enemy when they pop up like this is the round track, because once you can no longer move that round marker to a round space, you can't go ahead with another round of combat. We are able to go into round number 2 because we're able to move it to the second position, and we'll be able to go to the third round at maximum, but once it tries to go to the fourth, that is going to be a defeat for us if we haven't covered up all of the dice slots on the enemy. Final thing we'll do right now is any remaining dice from the dice pool that we didn't end up using to fill up slots on the enemy go back into the bag. At this point, we're going to be a bit more aggressive because now, thanks to having that other one covered up, we have to go after a green die and a white die. Well, guess what? We are definitely going to get those dice of those colors in there, even if it's going to cost us some stamina to do it. So we're going to use Constitution, 1 stamina, and we're also going to use Wisdom, 1 stamina, in order to get a green and a white die to build the die pool going into this second round of combat. Yes, my stress levels are rising. We are now at a current level of 10 in there, and we have 14 health. So we really need to make sure we're safe here, but that's going to entail at least guaranteeing we cover one of these die slots, or we're in big time trouble of becoming exhausted during the battle and losing. We don't want that. So we've got 2 dice here, and this Gang of card no longer applies. So our dice limit for combat goes up to 3, which means we get a random one from the bag. Let's go ahead and see what we get, although it's not going to need, well, I mean, if it's a green or a white, that's still good, and there could be the chance it could roll the number we need and we can manipulate it to work in one of the slots. So more dice is better, and look at that, we got a white. That worked out really good. So now we're going to go ahead and roll the die pool off and see what we get for options right out of the gate. We got ourselves a 1, 1, and a 3. This one's pretty obvious because I really need to get that white die, at least one of them, up to a 2. So the spell book here will help me as it affects only white dice. I can raise or lower it, so let's go ahead and use it. So I will be going ahead and discarding this card as it does not have a spend icon in the top left-hand corner. So this will be one that goes in the discard pile. That can come back into my hand a little bit easier than a spent card when you have to rest. And I'm going to go ahead and uptick this from a 1 to a 2. We're going to place that in that slot. That will cover that one. Now we need to work on the green one. Now, it's worth noting that there are abilities on the bottom of cards sometimes that you may or may not want to use. In this case, I have a strike 2, so I can spend 2 stamina from the Wisdom attribute row to return this card to the hand. But as you know, I've got way too many stamina sitting in my fatigue area. This is not going to be a helpful thing to do right now. The only other card that I have here that could potentially help me, but it's a complete gamble and it's a 1 in 6 shot, is the Mystic Robes. I am allowed to re-roll either a blue or a green die, and then it also has the ability to play any number of additional Mystic Armor cards if I had them. So this is why I was talking about the fact that when you're starting out true solo in Role Player Adventures, you're not going to have a ton of cards to work with right out of the gates, but as you go through the game, you are going to have more and more cards added to your hand for more and more dice manipulation. So don't worry, things will build out. And of course, if you've imported your character, a very powerful one from the original role player, you're going to be even further ahead into that first adventure. So let's go ahead and try this. Now, in order to do the Mystic Robes during this combat round and hope that I can take this thing out early, because I really don't want to go into a third round unless I need to, I'm going to have to burn my bonus play token to do so. The Mystic Robes are in the discard pile. We've spent the token here to allow us to do it, and now we're going to roll, and we're going to pray that we land a 1. This is going to be complete and utter fluke if this happens on camera. Here we go. Oh my gosh, I don't understand. Okay, well, I'm good with that. Perfect. So we're going to put that in there, and that, I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. Honestly, I couldn't have asked for a better thing to happen on camera, because this really does go to show the excitement that comes from the game, whether you're rolling a die and just hoping that you're going to land exactly what you need by pushing forward or pressing your luck a little bit. But also, there's all that dice manipulation of using the cards strategically without basing it in luck, but more so pure strategy and how to use the cards in what order to get the dice you need. And of course, at the very beginning, your pool of cards for dice manipulation is not that vast, but as the game goes on, you're going to have those options, and those moments of excitement are going to happen all throughout your adventures, even when you're not doing the most exciting things. At this point in time, I'm only fighting a gnoll at a camp. It's not a very exciting part of the campaign, but I'm already way too hyped up over that roll. So all the die slots are covered on the enemy card, so we can skip past any end of round stuff and talk about the end of combat at this point. So no matter the outcome of the combat, we're going to gain rewards for the covered dice slots. So at this point in time, we're going to take a look at those to see what we get. And 2 of them let us know we're getting 1 XP each. So both of those will go to the XP pool, giving us a total of 5 now. Next up, we're going to return all the dice to the dice bag. The round marker is going to come off the card, go back to the supply. The enemy card goes back to the enemy deck, and all the modifier cards to the modifier deck. Now, each player is going to return all cards from their discard pile back to their hand space. So that means my Mystic Robes and my Spellbook are coming back, but the wand sitting in the spent area is not. The next step is about the rest token. If the rest token is right now face down, which it is, you're going to flip it face up. And now we're going to go and review the entry inside the storybook around this combat in terms of the victory as we were victorious. You drive them away from the camp. We're now moving to C3. The gnolls retreat from your blades and flee back toward their homeland in the north. As they run, you set fire to their tents. By the light of the burning camp, you find something the cowards left behind. Reveal discovery card 86 and record the keyword gnoll on the campaign log. Another fire arises from across the lake. You trust that Tarek is making good progress and will meet you at the fortified gate ahead. The keyword gnoll has been now placed on the campaign log. Also, discovery card 86 is right here. The book now touches on something I covered earlier on, but it'll give a full explanation again around it, telling you that if you wish to combine items, you can. You'll just use the letter of where you're currently at, the 2 item numbers you wish to combine, and ensure that the lesser of the 2 numbers is the first one in terms of sequence. So in this case, if I wanted to combine the fireball and the pendant together at this location, the gnoll camp, it would be C65.86. I can't say why I wouldn't want to do this, as the options at this location are to use an item, rest, or move to another location. So let's use an item, and when you choose to use an item, that's when you can combine them together. So I'm going to do exactly that. And it states for C65.86, finding no use for these items together, you decide to play a game. You hang the bluestone fireball from the chain of a lodestone pendant and whirl it around over your head. Then you hurl the fireball into the air as high as you can, catching it again before it hits the ground. Fortunately, you are good at playing catch, so you do not explode yourself in the middle of the gnoll encampment. When your game is over, you feel reinvigorated. Each player adds 1 stamina to your strength attribute row from the supply, ignoring the usual limit. And that's great news for me, because my strength is terrible, and being that I can ignore the limit of 0, I can actually place 1 stamina in the strength attribute row. It gave me the option to use another item, so let's go ahead and just use the item I just gained, Discovery Card 86, for that pendant and find out what it means. What is this thing? It states here on C86, the lodestone pendant is expertly made. It's magnetic stone carved into a smooth shape. When you hold it by its chain, the pendant sways gently, responding perhaps to its invisible attraction to nearby metal, or perhaps to subtle motions of your hand. If you had something else to hang it from, you could get a clearer signal of its attraction to metal. Interesting. Alright, so I played enough games throwing fireballs into the air, inspecting the pendant. I think at this point in time, let's do some resting, deal with the stamina that I've got in my fatigue area. So we're going to spend 1 XP, maybe 2. I'm actually kind of tempted to do 2 because we have so much stamina there. So let's do that. Let's take 2 XP to do our rest. Now let's go ahead and roll some dice, hope for some seriously high numbers here to get back as much of the fatigue stamina as possible. Oh, that's not as good as I could have hoped for. So after rolling the dice, we got 4. We're going to return 4 stamina from our fatigue box to the supply. So 4 of these are going to disappear. And then each player is going to fill their attribute rows up to the attribute scores, or their limits, with stamina from the supply. So we're going to go back to the supply, which is off camera here, and we can see where you need 1 more in Constitution, 1 more in Intelligence, 1 more in Wisdom, and we're up to our maximums. And there we go. And this is quite interesting because you can see that your management of your attribute rows versus what's sitting inside of your fatigued area does really matter. So when you're going into a rest and you're choosing how much XP you want to spend to get a die for each of the XP that you're spending, you're going to roll those, and that's going to really be what cleans up your fatigue area of stamina. So I'm still going out of this rest with a total of 6 fatigue in there. And of course, I'm going to have a max up to 14 before I'm exhausted. So I was kind of trying on purpose to hopefully get high rolls off just 2 dice and not having to burn as much XP. But as you can see, that could come back to bite me. If the class card had been used and it was face down, we'd flip it back up, but it wasn't, so no issue there. We're now going to return all bonus play tokens from the fatigue box to the bonus play space on the party journal. So that means that token in the fatigue area is going to go away. So the bonus play token is now available again. Also, all spent cards in the spent area go back into my hand. And I've gone ahead and flipped over the rest token. So at this point, we go back to the entry that got us into this rest action, and our 2 options are to either use an item in this location. The only thing that I haven't used on its own at the Knoll camp is the Bluestone Fireball by itself yet, so maybe I should do that before I head out. The other option is to do exactly what I just mentioned, to head out. The question would be, though, do we head over to the Goblin camp, where we know Tarek is already over there handling things, or do we head straight to the outpost wall? And this is where part number 1 is going to wrap up. I'm going to leave those decisions to you guys, and based on the comments, I'm going to take whichever is the most popular and run with that to start off the next episode. Now, if you're not part of my Patreon community, I would love to see you there. If you enjoy what I do, I would greatly appreciate your support. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know in the comments how much you're enjoying this playthrough, and of course, whether you'd like to see more of it. Thank you guys for watching. And as always, keep on rolling solo.